Welcome to Darker Days Radio. I'm Mike, and this is Chris. How's it going, Chris?
Hey, I'm pretty cool. Yeah, it's everything's great.
Well, that was a really low energy response.
I'm a bit. It's just been hectic. I think I'm distracted because I'm still got. Oh God, how much stuff left to paint? Lots of stuff to paint and trying to read lots of books. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I
So
just,
I've been doing. I am happy. Don't worry. I just my brain is all over the place with things.
hey, I think I'm finally gonna start painting again because there's a new season of Mad Men on Netflix, and that's what I was watching as I painted War Machine stuff this past fall. So I'll probably be getting back into that. But we also have a very special guest with us, and who's that, Chris?
We have Matt, who is who's appeared before with us on our Cthulhu Tech one shot.
Indeed. How's it going, Matt?
It's going fine. I just got booted off the call.
Okay. Well, you're here now.
Yes, I am.
Yep.
Awesome. That stuff can happen with Skype, but no, it's very good to have you on the show. And you are a bit of a werewolf expert, so that's why we've grabbed you for this episode, because we're going to be going over the new Werewolf 20th Anniversary Edition core rulebook, among other things. So, without further ado, I think it's time to hop on over to White Wolf News. So, of course, White Wolf doesn't really make books anymore, but what they did recently release, or at least CCP, was Dust 514, which is the first-person shooter kind of sister game for EVE Online. So it's cool to see that out. Some people are playing it, seem to like it, and hopefully that's going to free up resources now for the World of Darkness MMO.
Is that's on PS3?
PS3 only.
Yeah, and it's not something you can just physically pick up a copy of in a shop.
It's
just
digital.
It's digital. So more than likely, what with the whole console thing going on right now, I guess it'll mostly be ported over to PS4. I would guess.
I would assume, yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Well,
new
considering
consoles.
it is purely digital, I mean, I'm pretty sure they've already been working on a port if they want to port it.
Yeah.
But I have heard that it's pretty neat just because of the fact of the way that it integrates with EVE Online. Like, if you're on the ground in Dust 514, you can communicate with people in EVE Online and have them bombard the planet that you're on.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of interesting. I'm not too sure how that works, like with the real time element, because I don't know whether there's a one-to-one with real time in Dust and real time, what is meant to be real time in Eve. So,
well, I've heard that it is one-to-one real time across both of them. The only thing I'm concerned about is I know that in EVE Online, if you get a gigantic pile of ships in one system, time starts to dilate so people can react to things that are happening.
yeah.
And I'm not sure how that would translate into Dust 514.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about. Okay, well, that's still quite interesting, and yes, it should mean, WoD MMO moves on as we get snippets of news turning up from that. So, shall we move on to what we actually know from Onyx Path?
Yes, definitely. Of course, Werewolf 20th is out, and we're going to be talking about it tonight. Additionally, they recently released the Mage Translation Guide, which is fueling flame wars across the internet.
I've not actually had a look at the translation guide. Have you had a look at it?
Nope. I'm pretty swamped with book reviews right now, so not grabbing anything else.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with the translation guide, I mean, I don't know. It's a distraction for me because I think I'm quite happy with how Mage the Awakening is as it is, and never really had a problem with Mage the Ascension. So Yeah. But what kind of Flame Wars have you seen,
Actually, I
or
haven't seen
random?
any. I'm just assuming.
We're just assuming. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, always one of the things that I think I've generally heard with regard to Mage the Awakening was that it, for system wise, would be, people always said they would, make conversions or have done conversions. So I guess having something that does the hard work for you, um, is obviously a good thing. Um, yeah, it's something I need to kind of look at picking up at some point, but too many other books to look at. Um, Speaking of other books, then, so Exalted Third Edition, it hit how much? $684,000. Well, over that, and so it's the number one RPG project on Kickstarter. So that was completely crazy. um, yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a Kickstarter. I can't remember what the final tally of freebie type stuff and stretch goals were. I think there were maps and different versions of deluxe covers, and obviously there's been funding towards future books for it. But it's good to see Exalted coming back, and obviously hoping it will address the issues with that game. In due course,
Oh
as
yeah.
the writers tackle those issues. So, yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and I just hope the system is not Exalted Second Edition, because that was a headache to run combat.
No way, Chris. Exalted is back with a vengeance.
Mm,
And Chris, I just counted. They hit 27 stretch goals.
27. Wow, that's pretty damn good. I mean, some of the stretch goals were even not extras for, in any sense. They were more kind of like pay rise bumps for the writers, which I think is an interesting form of stretch goal, and I think is kind of fair, because I think some of the things I've read here and there about Kickstarter is that maybe there's now become a bit too much of a case of people, backers feeling. They feel like they should be each stretch goal should be something for the backers, which I don't think is. It's just a whole entitlement element of fans and collectors, isn't it? So
Mm-hmm. Yep, I concur. And some other stuff that's been going on, a little more development for V20. Eddie Webb has been putting out complete chapters for Rites of Blood, and he's been getting quite a bit of feedback. And I, in fact, think I might be using some of the rituals featured in that book this summer in a chronicle.
okay, I haven't actually had a look at the stuff for that. Anything? What's the most interesting stuff kind of popping out of those chapters then?
It's only rituals. I don't remember seeing any thaumaturgical paths at all. And there's, chapters for Anarchs, Camarilla Sabbat, and also the Tel Mahera and the Incarnu, which is pretty cool to see. Let's see, what else? Oh, there's even a write-up for the Hexaped, which is a kind of freaky human centipede-like creature, which appeared in previous books that the Tremere kind of make them. Weird stuff.
As the Tremere do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because they want to be everything, and I guess they wanted to show up the Zamitzi with a little flesh crafting of their own.
Well, didn't they make the gargoyles?
They did, yes.
Yes, they did. And what else we've been getting on the blogs? Obviously, Matt McFarland is writing up his actual play reports for Demon the whatever the hell it is. And he's also blogged a little bit about what it means to play these demons, and the idea of the concept of covers. So to explain that briefly, a demon is obviously a fallen angel of the God Machine, and when the God Machine creates an angel to act on its behalf, to manipulate infrastructures and set them up and harvest from these infrastructures, it creates what is known as a cover. Now, these covers are obviously the example was like a janitor. So the angel takes on the role of a janitor, performs the task as a janitor, obviously does its angelic roles as well. So it has, people think, oh, it's just a janitor. But when they go back to their home, because obviously they have a cover, they have all the things to set up this front. The angel doesn't go to sleep. They don't eat because it's all just very much surface kind of things. But when they leave the God Machine, and so they're a demon, they now actually have to sleep. They have to eat, and there's certain like advantages to this. So maybe they would be taking a paycheck all the time they've been operating under this cover, and suddenly they've now got all this money saved up, which they've never spent. And then there was a further thing about how it was possible that a demon could lose its cover and take on a new one, which basically is kind of an element of soul stealing to it, and deleting people from reality. So it's definitely a strange beast, and I'm quite looking forward to seeing a demon, more of demon, and eventually when it hits. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Definitely pretty neat and unique. The other thing that came out recently is Reap the Whirlwind, which is the free RPG Day product. I was, in fact, at the game store yesterday and picked up a copy, and then got roped into a vampire game, playing the Into the Void SAS Adventure. So it was pretty sweet. Things kind of went our way eventually, and killed the prince, killed the sheriff. One guy in the party became the prince. I became the sheriff. So victory for the Carthians, bitches.
What kind of bits of the rules were kind of shown off then? Because obviously this is kind of a prelude to what we'll see in Blood and Smoke.
Right. We covered. We did conditions. So I, for example, had the inspired condition with my crowbar, which it was actually really important later on for getting some secret documents. Additionally, the new Masquerade and Requiem system was used. So Masquerade is your sort of mortal identity, and your Requiem is like your true vampiric identity as well. And that replaces Virtue and Vice for how you regain willpower.
Okay, yeah, because the idea of a Masquerade and a Requiem first turned up in Dance Macabre, so in that it was more of they ranked it 1 to 5 as sort of a merit, but to see it being used as a Virtue and Vice is kind of interesting because obviously it's the whole idea that, it's the same way with what we've read about vampire having a different approach to what humanity is as well. So obviously as a vampire you have slightly different morals or different ways of viewing the world. So yeah, the idea that you're working towards keeping to your Masquerade or keeping to your Requiem as a way of getting back willpower. Does that mean then, am I right in thinking that you get back all your willpower points back if you act in a way that is towards your Masquerade?
Yeah, if you go like balls to the wall to keep your identity and keep the Masquerade going, yes, you regain all your willpower. But likewise, if you go balls to the wall and really embrace your vampiric nature, screw the Masquerade and all that, you can also regain all your willpower. So both of the extremes will work.
Okay, that's kind of cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's kind of neat. It reinforces that the whole point is that this is a modified way of doing morality because it's about this dealing with stress and trauma rather than this kind of the old Victorian sense of morality. Okay, cool. Looking forward to seeing that.
Yep, definitely good stuff. And I guess the last bit of news from Onyx Path is we're just going to mention that David Hill is going to be working on Dark Ages, or is currently working on Dark Ages, Darkening Skies, a new book for the Dark Ages line of Classic World of Darkness. So that's going to be really cool to see.
And that, I think, does that cover all Dark Ages game lines?
Yes. Yeah, it has a bit of information on Inquisitors, Fae, Mages, Werewolves, and Vampires.
Yeah, that's kind of neat. That's good to see more Dark Ages stuff turning up.
Yep. So, Chris, what kind of Darker Days news do we have?
Oh, what have we got? So myself and Peter, we did the Fading Suns Darkling, where we kind of went over the entire setting, and I think we'll be looking at maybe doing another one of those in future, where we maybe start going through in detail more of each of the factions, maybe. What else? And I've been doing videos. I've been getting used to video editing and getting better and better at it. So there's well, let's think. I did the video review of the Buildings of Malifaux set. I'm still waiting for 2 more of the Terraclip sets to turn up, so there'll be another video for those. And also the kind of product overview review of Iron Kingdoms. So that's kind of like what content is already published that you can get hold of since Iron Kingdoms was released. And then an unboxing of the War Machine 2-player starter set, which was, again, is a really great set that I've been painting up. So there's lots of pictures up on the community, and I guess I should put something up somewhere on the Dark Days website with some of that. And yeah, just hope to get some more stuff soon. And obviously we've had those videos kindly shared by Privative Press on their Facebook, so they got a massive amount of hits. So obviously there are some fans out there, and I think there are some fans of Iron Kingdoms out there, which leads me to think that we need to do some more Darklings on that setting.
Yeah, I finally got the core book, so we'll see what happens.
Excellent.
I've liked what I've read so far about Iron Kingdoms.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty interesting.
It very much takes a lot of the Tolkien-esque fantasy elements and kind of gives them a new spin. Like the fact that elves aren't the oldest race in the setting kind of makes me happy. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the miniatures are great. And really working the roleplay. What else we got coming up or done? We were on the Wadcast.
Yes, I showed up on episode 4 and completely raged because I found out that there's going to be no Mac version, at least not at release, and I have a MacBook Pro, so I'm pretty sad. I said some things which I maybe shouldn't have. I'm sorry, Chris McDonough.
Yeah, I mean it's always a tough thing with that, isn't it? But hopefully I should be on the next one, episode 5, and I'm hoping that James will be able to appear with me. So, because James has obviously got some proper background, actual legitimate background in like MMO design and stuff, and works for companies that have done that type of thing. So he will be there with me, with the other hosts and guests on that show. So I don't know what we're going to be talking about next show, just mostly what other little tidbits turned up. Oh, I think there was one thing that turned up that was interesting. That was on the Wad News website. Someone, obviously, that you look for people's CVs that have worked for said companies, because it can give you insight into games that haven't been released yet. Mm-hmm. So this one CV had some talk about social networks linking or social networks as part of a way of integrating with the political systems of World of Darkness Online. So the whole idea maybe of a social network being embedded into the MMO is not too much of a leap,
right?
And actually makes a lot of sense. So we were kind of on the mark, I think. It would be interesting if we are on the mark with that when it finally gets released.
Totally. And the last bit of Darker Days news is it's a little sad. Guys, I failed the Changeling the Dreaming Challenge. I just can't do it, guys. Just can't do it.
You can't do it. What's wrong with it?
There's nothing wrong with it. It's just it's not Changeling. It's me. It's me.
Okay.
And I just couldn't come up with any good ideas. So instead this summer I'm going to be running the Tremere Chronicle on Google Hangouts, and anyone is free to join. I think we have 3 players right now, so there's definitely a 4th slot open. And I'm going to be trying something a little interesting, where the characters are set in stone, but the players are not. So if someone can't make it one week, someone else can just jump in and take over their character for one session. Hopefully it'll make it run a bit smoother, and yeah, we'll see what happens. And I think that's it for all of our news. Let's move on over to the Classic World of Darkness segment.
Classic World of Darkness.
So, Werewolf the Apocalypse. Game's a bit of a shred fest, isn't it? I mean, when you're reading through the W20 core book, you can feel the heavy metal music that some of these writers were listening to as they were, typing this up.
I'm not even going to start because I wrote my review, so I'm sure I've got people that want to shoot me. Shall we just start with what is Werewolf the Apocalypse and what the general idea, concept, theme, mood of the game is and the scope of it, and then from there maybe we can see how W20 caters to all that again, but also provides a bit more.
Yeah.
Well, Werewolf the Apocalypse was my first role-playing game, so I'm kind of a fanboy for it, I'd guess. Ever so slightly. But most of what I think Werewolf the Apocalypse is it's a game of massive scope. Not only are you fighting to save the world, you're fighting to save existence as we know it and the idea of the world as it exists. Like, you fight in the real world, you fight in the spiritual world, you fight against pollutions, both environmental and social. There's a lot of different battlefields that you can find within the world, and it's really fun in that way. The idea is that there is the world spirit Gaia, who created the world as we know it. And then to facilitate this, she created the forces of creation, definition, and destruction, which were the wild, weaver, and worm. And the wild would create things, the weaver would name them, give them form, give them purpose, and the worm would destroy them when, he was done with, when they had served their purpose. But then the weaver got kind of annoyed that all of her stuff was getting broken, so she bound up the worm in her webs, bound all of reality in her webs, split the physical and spiritual into two different things. And Gaia saw this happening, said, that's probably not the best of ideas, and she created the changing breeds, among them werewolves. And so the idea behind Werewolf the Apocalypse is that you are trying to prevent, one of any number of endgame scenarios that are not so good for the real world. Mostly you're fighting the worm, because the worm wants to corrupt everything and bring it down to, destruction.
Okay. Yeah, I think that covers it, in a fairly complete way. I mean, I have to admit, I've never played Werewolf the Apocalypse, and where do I start? My first RPG was obviously D&D, and then followed that with Soul. So my first World of Darkness game was Vampire the Masquerade, and then after that I jumped headlong into Mage the Ascension. So for me, reading Werewolf the Apocalypse 20th anniversary has been kind of it's been interesting because it's there's so much that's familiar to me because of how much crosses over with Mage the Ascension, and so I understand the scope, because the scope is in many respects very similar to that of Mage the Ascension. It's this very big battle for reality in some form. Yeah, Mike?
Right. Well, one of the things, actually, Chris, you and I were talking about this a little bit this past week, is, and maybe Matt, you can shed some insight onto this, because you're obviously the werewolf expert right here. But Vampire, from first edition to revised, had huge changes in the scope of the game, shifting from this very personal horror game to this sort of hot war between the Camarilla and the Sabbat. And Mage the Ascension has a similar drastic change from when you have the more personal elements of first edition and also really awful rules, leading up to second edition, which has you flying through astral realms, blasting technocracy spaceships, going to the more down-to-earth revised version, which focuses very strongly on how really the traditions have almost lost the Ascension War. Has Werewolf had a similar change between the editions, in your opinion?
Well, take this with the caveat that I didn't get into Werewolf until revised. But I have tried to go back and read as much as I could of the previous editions. And from what I understand, first edition Werewolf was very big on putting together setting books. Like that's where we have Rage Across Australia, Rage Across the Amazon, and then the by night books, like the New York by Night and stuff like that, which where a lot of they took a lot of cues from Vampire. And then in second edition, they started exploring the Umbra more. Like
Mm.
that's where we got Rage Across the Heavens and the
Hmm.
Prophecy of the Phoenix and the Perfect Metis, which are their own things. But then in revised, I think they tried to get away from all that because sort of like for the same reasons about Mage was that the game line was focusing too much about all right, you do your stuff in the real world for your first couple of ranks, but then you go off into the Umbra and have magic special adventures, and you don't really care about the real world anymore. And so I think in revised they really tried to get it more into the real world is what matters because without the real world the spiritual world is also going to die kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And that, of course, brings us to Werewolf 20th Anniversary, which is a huge book,
Yes.
555 pages on my PDF.
Hmm.
And there's extensive comic book in the beginning, and it really covers pretty much everything you could want for player options. A lot of information on the different tribes, even tribes that don't exist anymore, as well as most, if not all, of the changing breeds. In fact, I'd say all the changing breeds are there except for like the Komazats and
Well,
other dead ones. Yeah.
yeah, they don't have the Kazmatods or the Apis or the third guys whose name I can't remember.
Hmm. I mean, it is a huge book, and I think the great thing about it is obviously because I have to be honest because obviously like I came at this from the whole thing of I've never really touched a Werewolf the Apocalypse book. I think other than the fact I've played a Fomori game, and the fact is like it's great that it is so complete, but I in reading it, I think that while I can see how it really does cater to the fans of the game, I don't know whether it's really the most ideal book or it's set up as the most ideal book for someone that's never really played it and wants to know how to get started in it. Because, like you say, the scope of the game is so big, but it can get kind of. I wouldn't even really know where to begin running a game of Werewolf the Apocalypse, and I think that's the only thing I found difficult with the book, that it didn't give much guidance in that. I didn't find.
Yeah, and I can see that as a problem
Mm,
because I mean there's a lot of books in the World of the Apocalypse line, like the various storyteller guides and the various tribe books and the players guides even that
yeah,
go into more about the setting of the world and how those things are. I think what they tried to do with World of the Apocalypse is just make a definitive edition for everything they could, and the vast majority of what they had were rules. And I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I'd put it as a failing for the book because odds are, if you're wanting to play a Werewolf the Apocalypse game, you're probably not. You probably know about it beforehand, and that's why you're picking up the 20th anniversary edition.
yeah,
You
exactly.
you wouldn't pick up the 20th anniversary edition as your first book in most cases.
Yeah, I mean that's why I found the. I mean, I think it's great that they have all the. I mean, it's great you've got maybe all the changing breeds there for people that already play the game, but I found them kind of a bit of a. It felt a bit of a distraction because I was kind of like trying to think, well, if you put this in front of a bunch of new players and you go, let's play a game of Werewolf, I would want to, on my first outing, have them play werewolves and to kind of say, don't look at that book. And I think that's partly also why the book is obviously when you look at the bookmarks for this book, it is set up into definite, discrete books. So the last section of the book really, it's one of those kind of like virtual box sets where you could go just you just do not let your players look at that because that contains a whole load of options that will distract them from trying to think up something that is which will give like a good unified kind of play experience.
Right. The appendix is where you have the Merits, the White Howlers, and the Croatan, which are all things you probably don't want first-time players playing.
No. And I would say even the same, like again with like the change of breeds. But I mean, I can see it's so that you would say then this book is ultimately though for someone that's played Werewolf the Apocalypse for as long as you have is kind of it contains everything you would ideally want in one book without having to like dance between different books already on your bookshelf.
Correct. And I think, it's one of those books where like it is a definitive edition, it's very good, but you would need someone who has werewolf experience to get
Hmm.
someone else into the setting,
Hmm.
more than likely. Because they have the various short blurbs on the tribe, but they're probably just as long as they were in the Apocalypse Core. And and you've got the setting information, which is again probably just as long as in the Apocalypse Core. There's probably a little less personal fiction
Hmm.
because they devoted that space towards the comic in the front. Which again, the comic in the front was probably devoted more towards the longtime fans of the setting. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's a very good book. But I can see where you're coming from in saying that it's not really for new players.
Yeah. I mean, I found it difficult to really even find like like there's so many tribes. I mean, if you can then because I obviously I'm not too sure. So in the tribe section of the book, there's like 13 main tribes. Is that right? There's 13 main tribes. I've got my numbers wrong, but those are all original. That you would always have played in revised as well. Again,
Hmm.
I think I always have a feeling when I see that many options, this is this is post New World of Darkness me speaking in this way is that it's a lot of options, and I often think that maybe there's so much like kind of like overlap between these that really sometimes the real difference between some of them is simply because of like they've gone well they're from one part of the world ethnic in an ethnic kind of sense and they're from another part and that kind of leaves me feeling a bit like again it's these distractions when you really want to ask a player what type of thing do you want to play rather than having to read all these different things and trying to choose between things that can actually be quite similar. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's difficult. I'm trying to be as fair as looking at it from my perspective. But like, what else? I mean, what else was in the book then that is new? I mean, I noticed they updated a lot of they updated in various places the setting information to reflect kind of many of the events that have occurred around the world. So obviously, there's talk of the Gulf of Mexico oil spill. There's a bit on tsunami and nuclear power plant meltdown in Japan, and various things like that, like the war in Afghanistan and obviously the war in Iraq and so forth and so forth. And those bits I found kind of interesting. Additions because obviously it shows that they've put some good thought into how to make the setting evolve and again kind of like offsetting when the apocalypse occurs because obviously the apocalypse occurred was meant to occur however many years previously but now this assumes you've chosen that your apocalypse occurs 10 years away from now or 20 years away from now or whatever.
Well, like I think I've said before, is that there's a thing that I like about War of the Apocalypse is that like they always kind of put like the apocalypse is going to happen, but you never know when.
Hmm.
And in revised, they put a hard clock on it. They made it so, like no new Guru were ever going to be born. Like you knew the apocalypse was going to happen because they were trying to set up for the end of the game line. And I think that hurt the game as a whole
I agree, yeah.
because it kind of killed a lot of some of the themes in the werewolf book, which were like relating with your family and trying to create new Guru and making sure that the fight will be able to continue past your lifetime. Putting a hard end date on the apocalypse kind of kills some of the drama of the whole thing. Whereas I'm thinking in Vampire and Mage, not as a Vampire Mage player, but I think that just kind of ramps up the drama in a vampire game because you know that Gehenna is coming and you're trying to put your affairs in order before it does.
Hmm.
Whereas in go
I was
ahead.
going to say like it. So yeah. I mean, in Vampire, it's different because obviously, it's the whole time thin blood kind of thing, and the difference I would say in Vampire is that if you know that Gehenna is coming very soon, it's that whole kind of millennial fever kind of element to it, and either you're an old elder who's obviously doing his last kind of big maneuver to get everything together so they can survive and or do whatever. And if you're a neonate or a younger vampire in general, it's kind of like it's almost a feverish kind of feeling of trying to find some way out. And the thing I got from reading Wealth from 20th anniversary is that in different places it did talk about relating to your kinfolk and the importance of kinfolk and the importance of kinfolk wolves, and because they're becoming rarer and rarer, and but all those things to worry about, which I would say are mundane worries, because they're basically the things that you worry about of continuing what is about you, seems rather pointless when the apocalypse is coming, and it literally states in a number of places all the Garou who will fight in the final battle have been born. And it's kind of like, then why am I worrying about these guys? Like, we need to get to the fight now. And so the focus seems a little jumbled.
Mm-hmm.
And in Mage, I think that's different again. In Mage Ascension, it's different again because you're in a race to, as the apocalypse gets closer, one of the options in Ascension that you could play out is that more and more people are awakening. So you've now got this this kind of snowballing effect where more people are awakening to manipulate reality, and so you can still care about these people. But whereas before you'd be slowly kind of gathering and harvesting and bringing together people that could be potential allies, now they're just waking up everywhere, and the trick is getting them onto your side sooner rather than later. So yeah, I think Werewolf. Yeah, I don't know. How would you then address that then, Matt? How would you kind of balance the whole worrying about your tribe and your territory and kind of more local mundane issues, and then dealing with the bigger meta plot issue?
Well, like I said, I'd make sure that, the apocalypse is still kind of a ways off, or even like there's a big thing that what they did with the book is there's this prophecy of the Phoenix,
Hmm.
which is saying, like a guy like Phoenix came down to him and basically gave him a timeline of when things were going to happen. And some things were interpreted, some things were very obvious, like the eye of the worm opens, a new red star like appears in the sky over, I can't remember where, but it's like, there's a new star in the sky that's like bright blood red. That's probably the eye of the worm. And like just like leave those kind of prophecies in there, but like have the apocalypse happen when it needs to happen. Don't, give them like advance warning, like, well, you're not having kids anymore, so the apocalypse is probably happening. This isn't happening anymore, so that's probably, a thing you don't need to worry about anymore. Like, I think what they wanted to do is make it so that, like make them into non-issues so that the players don't have to worry about them as they trudge off to war. But doing that kind of, lessens some of the impact of, you have to go off to war and you have to leave your family behind. You probably won't see them again, but
Mm.
hopefully, your line will continue. And
I I was going to say there's something that I think when I've sat down and thought about this, and Mike, we were talking about this in relation to how the Gold Machine Chronicles had stuff in there, because the Gold Machine Chronicles has different tiers of gameplay that it gives out, and so in New World Darkness it presented you could play at a very local level, and then at a larger level, so city level, and then at a country, and then international, then global, and then obviously cosmic scale. And the one thing which I think is important about that, because again, you're playing characters that are against a cosmic entity, and the Weaver and the Worm are cosmic entities. Okay, so it made me think that you could take some inspiration from there, because one of the main things in God Machine Chronicles is that the God Machine creates these infrastructures to move itself towards its end game, but it means that people can combat it either at a local or at any of those tiers, because depending upon their awareness. And I think that could be something that could be more interesting way to approach the ideas in Werewolf the Apocalypse. So say your players are this pack, and they're say set in the city of, somewhere in like say in Pittsburgh, and they're not big players in their tribes, they're not big players in their city, but they get involved in some plots, and the whole thing is that they interact with the infrastructures of what the worm is doing, and they prevent something. So there's this feeling that they are fighting against it, but they're not fighting against it on the, they're literally tearing its throat out, but they're still hindering it. And I think that then maybe plays into the idea that you can work the whole how things in the real world reflect into the spirit world, and how there are different sized cogs, and sometimes the most important cogs are not the big ones.
Right, and there's a lot in the various other werewolf books that do go over that.
Okay, yeah.
There's books about, like, how to run things on a city scale, or like how the tribes handle things, and it's spread out around a whole bunch of books, but that information is there. And there's information in the Storyteller's Guide that it can't always be, giant epic stories. Every so often you have to bring them back to their, home sept and have them deal with the kinfolk, because at some point in time you have to humble them somewhat, because if they're all about glory and honor and doing all that stuff, then they're ignoring wisdom, and that's going to take a hit. And even the most strongest, most powerful Arun needs to understand that from time to time they have to step back and look at things. And that's a strength of the Garou Nation, I think, in Werewolf the Apocalypse, is that the storyteller has this massive social construct that they can use both against and for their players and for the story.
You see, that sounds great, and if you say that kind of information was like spread over however many Werewolf the Apocalypse books, I don't know, I just have this gut feeling that would have been that information would have been better kind of collected together and put in the 20th anniversary book and pull out the changing breeds, because to me, if you want this, I don't know, it's my opinion, what a definitive werewolf book should have been, is a definitive werewolf book should have been delivering this definite werewolf the Apocalypse experience, and I think that could have given you that experience over a broad range of scope and these tiers and scale.
Well, my question,
and then the
I guess,
changing breeds could have waited for another book, because I don't see the importance of the changing breeds as much, maybe.
The changing breeds are waiting for another book. They're getting their own Kickstarter thing here pretty soon, and I honestly was kind of surprised that they had that information in there. But the information they did have was rather small. Like, that's about as much information as the changing breeds got in the first Werewolf Storyteller's Guide. Like, that small amount. My question is, did Vampire 20th Anniversary have a storyteller's section?
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing. Like, I think the difference between werewolf and vampire is that there's a lot about werewolf that is intrinsic to werewolf, whereas vampire is more about, like, you're playing vampires, and there's a lot of those themes that everybody knows about already. Whereas Werewolf the Apocalypse it's got a lot of information to it that's very rich, and they had to spend time going over the Umbra, and they had to spend time going over a whole bunch of other things. And I think they did a very good job with the amount of information that they had to get across. Because there's a lot of very unique quote-unquote Werewolf the Apocalypse information that they had to get across to the end users in a definitive edition.
Well, I think that's why you can get it. You can almost get away with the lack of, I guess the kind of the storyteller section that I would have liked to have seen in Werewolf 20. You can get away with kind of sort of not having a vampire because of how if you ask people about playing a game where they're vampires, I think that's maybe easier for new players to kind of get behind than what it is to play the werewolves of Werewolf the Apocalypse, because as you say, there's a lot of unique information there. They're not just the werewolves you see in any other genre TV or film or anything. There's a lot of extra stuff that makes the Garou. So yeah, it's a balance thing. But yeah, hopefully they put that all out as an extra book then, because that's ideally what I would like to see. What more do we want to say about the book then, Mike?
Well, I think a good question, especially for Matt, since we have him here, is looking at the different werewolf tribes. Our real world society has evolved quite a bit since 1992. What tribes have changed in their portrayal significantly, hopefully for the better, and which ones still kind of are lacking in their cultural portrayal? Because Werewolf, of course, has had some issues with pretty questionable stereotypes in the past.
Yeah. Do you mean from first to revised, or you mean from revised to Werewolf 20?
From anything up to Werewolf 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think the one that has changed, the two that have changed the most in their portrayals have been the Get of Fenris and the Uktena.
Mm-hmm.
Because in first edition Werewolf the Apocalypse, the Get of Fenris were very, almost painfully German and very, very racist. They were sort of Nazis without actually being called Nazis. And they were very big on blood purity. They were very big on strength above all else. And they hated the other tribes for being weak because they weren't strong like the Get of Fenris were. And it kind of spiraled out from there. Then Get of Fenris Revised came out, and they downplayed a lot of that. The tribe as a whole tried to distance themselves from the Nazis because there were a lot of Get of Fenris who did some very horrible things during World War II, and the Get of Fenris really don't like talking about that. And they tried to emphasize, strength as a whole, but not physical strength as much as if you're a hacker, be the best goddamn hacker you can be. That is your strength. You have to have a certain amount of physical combat capability because you're a Garou, but we're not going to hate you because you can't bench press a car because you can do other things that we can't.
Mm-hmm.
And there were and in previous editions, there was a lot of some very sexist undertones too. And they kind of address that in Revised, whereas the tribe as a whole, they do a lot of hazing of younger female Garou, but their justification is that they're doing it as a test, as a kind of thing. They want them to push back, to say this isn't cool, you need to stop it, at which points they will, because they don't want people who are going to internalize that and let it get at them and then explode at a later date, because you're dealing with human culture who has those issues with women, objectifying them, treating them as second-class citizens, and then you're putting those issues onto a person who's, filled with, more anger than any human being could ever possibly understand. And that's their way of trying to handle it. Probably not in the best way, and they admit that they've driven away a lot of women to the Black Furies as a result, but that's how they've been trying to address it. Because even in their tribe, they've got a bunch of people who treat women very poorly. I think they moved from we're the Get of Fenris and this is the way we are and it's great, to having people saying, yeah, we made some mistakes in the past. And for a tribe like the Get of Fenris, that's huge. That owning up to the fact that they made mistakes shows a lot of growth for the tribe. And then you have the Uktena, who at the start were kind of the Native American mystic tribe. and that's really as far as they went, to in revised just turning into a mystic tribe, and also including, other various minorities that they try to include, and even a few, European people of European descent, but they try to keep to the more oppressed people in whatever nation they go to. But that's because what they try to do is they try to learn about the local legends and cultures and whatever evils might be bound therein, and making sure that they stay bound. Like, that's how the Uktena go.
Yeah, no, that's pretty neat actually for the Uktena because obviously the more cultured societies, the upper class doesn't pay much attention to such legends and myths. So that is a pretty neat reason for them to kind of stick down to the lower class, lower caste.
Well, the more oppressed class, the lower caste people are the Bone Nars, who are their
Right.
own thing, and they've been portrayed well or poorly depending on the author. Their revised book is pretty damn good.
And Matt, which tribes haven't changed enough, in your opinion?
The Wendigo and the Fianna.
Ah, so the other
And
Native American tribe.
yeah, the Wendigo, like, the hat that they wear is the angry Native American, which is a pretty offensive hat to even exist, nonetheless have to be forced to wear.
Hmm.
And their whole shtick is that they know the way that things are supposed to go, and the white men can never understand them, so they must do it themselves. And then when the white man comes in and ruins things because they don't know any better, it's the white man's fault.
Hmm. Yeah. And then the Fianna, your issue with them not changing enough is.
They put forth a lot of very offensive Irish and, to a lesser extent, Scottish, but not that much Scottish because the Scots were another tribe. But they put forward a lot of really bad stereotypes. Like, as my friend put it, they're so Irish it hurts,
Hmm.
with an O. Um, yeah, like they're all about they associate with the fairies a lot. There's a very real hatred of physical deformity, because they see physical deformity as a sign of spiritual deformity. But they're the tribe who puts out the most Metis as a
Hmm.
whole, who are the deformed offspring of Tugaru. And so there's this like subculture in the Fianna who, kill Metis at birth because they don't want the other tribes to know how many of them they produce. And it's kind of, offensive. It's like, yeah, so you guys like are all about free love and getting drunk and having sex, but you don't want to admit the bad parts of any of that. And you're just being really Irish the rest of the time.
Yeah. I mean, this brings the one thing which I guess is yeah, it's difficult because when you go through this, like I like some of the tribes in there simply because of they do have a good kind of conceptual theme, but it's not tied to any form of ethnic origin whatsoever. And then there are ones which are so, as you say, so Irish or so angry Native American. It just kind of makes you just go, what? Because there may be a basic gem of a theme there, but why does it have to be tied to a kind of a caricature of a group of people?
Oh, like I said, I think part of that is that it's baggage from the mythology.
Hmm.
Because originally, like way back when, there were, and I'm not sure how much of this was established in first edition or not, but there were three Native American tribes before the Europeans came.
Hmm.
And so you had the Croatan, who were kind of like the leaders of the three tribes, and then the Uktena, who were the mystics, and the Wendigo, who were the warriors. And within the microcosm of North America, that worked pretty well. But then the European tribes came, and now you've got the Wendigo, who are the warriors, and the Get Fenris, who are the warriors, and the rest of the Garou, who are also warriors, and the Red Talons, who are the warriors, except they're all lupus.
Hmm.
And they lost a lot of what made them special, and what was left was Native American, but the Uktena were also Native American. Just the Uktena had more room to grow than the Wendigo did.
And I think this is the thing which I think is where, obviously, I we'll talk about this a bit later, is where it's interesting to draw a parallel between these tribes and the ones in Werewolf the Forsaken, because I think there's a definite, there's obviously a sign of how there was a obvious changing in thought process of how to approach writing about tribes and where werewolves come from and how they're tied to particular areas. Okay, cool. I'm trying to think of some more questions and things to talk about in there. I mean, the one thing I do really like in the book is I mean, if you're going to pick it up and you want to run Werewolf, there is a absolute ton of. Obviously, there is pretty much every single power and ritual and rite under the sun in there, and there is a pretty complete antagonist section. So, be it various types of spirits and that you want to throw against your players. So in that sense, there's a lot. It could be very, it'd be very difficult to exhaust this book in
Right.
just one chronicle. So that's a great thing about it.
Right, and like I was saying, I'm not trying to, rag on the werewolf writers by saying that they didn't change the Fianna and the Wendigo and they didn't change some of the other things, because, to be honest, they really couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they got rid of them, they would have pissed off people. If they didn't change them, they would have pissed off people. If they had changed them, they would have pissed off people. There's a lot of things that have been in Werewolf since first edition that are there. They've become a part of what makes Werewolf the Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
And the complaints about them have been there since, forever. It's just part and parcel about what makes Werewolf the Apocalypse what it is. And, it's still an excellent game for all its faults. And the fact is that the faults are there, and you as a player, like, there are people in the setting that do try to address those faults. Like, there are people who go up against the Fianna and say, hey, you guys need to stop, doing some of the crap you're doing. And people try to and the Uktena try to get the Wendigo to stop being so crazy. Like, the writers realize that there are problems in the setting, and they try to address it within the setting, which I think is good for them. I mean, it's an excellent setting, and I really do like it. And I would recommend it if you've ever, even if you've played Werewolf the Apocalypse before. It's a really good setting.
Yeah, totally. Now, what about the rules? Like, what have been the major changes, or powers dropped, powers not really added but changed, and that sort of thing in W20?
Well, I'm not sure about what powers have been changed because, as Chris said, there are a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even sure how many pages worth of gifts.
It's a lot. It's a lot, yeah.
At least 48 pages worth of gifts to go through. But there have been some changes in gifts, like just some balancing among them, making the really strong ones a little bit weaker or more expensive. They did the Wraith thing of getting rid of dodge as a stat entirely. Mm-hmm. Dodge has been rolled into athletics.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, like, there's almost all, if not all, of the gifts. Most of the rights that are important. Most of the merits that people took that weren't broken in half. Because there were some of those too. There are some of the backgrounds, not all of them, but there's enough of them that you can make pretty much whatever thematic character you want to. Like, there were a bunch that were introduced in Revised Edition as optional backgrounds, but not all of them are in here.
Right. And are those mostly like the more Guru Society specific kind of backgrounds?
The ones that come to mind were Worm Touched, Wild Touched, and Weaver Touched, which aren't in here.
Okay.
And those were those are the ones that were really, really mathy. Like you could use them to game the system. I know Wild Touch made it so that if you got successes, like if you got an exceptional success, it just gave you more successes. And Weaver Touch turned you could never you almost always succeeded, but you never did exceptionally well. You just succeeded. And Worm Touched was you could spend willpower points to just get an absurd number of dice added to the roll. Like it's supposed to be but you're being corrupted by the worm, but you're also getting have 7 dice. Like that kind of stuff. Like they got rid of a lot of the really mathy metagaming stuff and tried to make things better.
Is there anything you're going through, say, other sections you're happy that they included that would have been, say, in various different books at one point that they've brought together? So, be it, certain sets of gifts, or I would say even certain sets of, antagonists in here. So that you're happy to see that's been brought into this core book.
They brought one of my favorite antagonists into the core book, which is DNA.
Okay.
Which is a mortal company. They're entirely mortal. They have absolutely no idea that the Weaver exists or that the worm exists, but they do her work because they think that lycanthropy is a disease, a genetic disorder, and they're trying to cure it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's one section this says a lot maybe about me as a person and possibly speaks to my Mage the Ascension days. I really enjoyed reading through all the Pentech section and corporations because, that resonates a lot with having run a lot of Mage and having played a Technocracy game. So, I can easily get behind these elusive, evil corporations and all their subsidiary companies, such as O'Tolly's and Black Dog Game Factory and so forth. And it was good reading through that section because again they've included in places changes where to keep up with the way our world has evolved, such as the virtual world of Black Dog's. So Black Dog Gaming Company obviously has now got a thriving online game about to come into being, and it's a reflection of the world based upon the work from some creature from Scandinavia. So obviously having some fun at CCP there. Yeah. But I really enjoyed that section, and there's a lot of antagonists like agencies and paramilitary mercenaries and so forth that you can drop into your game. So there's a lot you can use straight away.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, that there's a bunch of gifts from other books that have now been brought into the core for easier reference. It used to be when you were making a character, it's I can make a Glasswalker and pull gifts from 7 different books.
Yeah, that's. I'm never a fan of when you get into that scenario unless you've got some nice way of now we have PDFs that you can copy the relevant rules into a handout for your player, so he's got some sort of cut down version. So they can actually run the game quicker. Yeah, it's always good when it's all in one place and obviously searchable. Excellent. So, do we have anything more we want to say on the book, Mike, or can we do a bit of a wrap up of this? Or
yeah, I guess we can do a wrap up. I mean, definitely Werewolf is a great game. I know we didn't go too in depth about the setting and the different tribes here, but you can check out Darker Days Radio episode number 22, where Mark and I discuss just that in a rapid fire segment.
Yeah, I mean, I would say going through it, I'm, like I say, with the antagonist section and various other bits, it's still a right book for me to plunder for ideas for a slightly different werewolf game, and for spirits to dump it into any other World of Darkness game. So, it's all there, and it's quite clearly designed for the fans of the classic books. I'm just not one of them. Oh well.
All right, very good. Any last comments, Matt?
Not right now. I mean, we've mostly gone over everything I like about Apocalypse.
All right, awesome. Cool. All right, with that, let's move on over to the secret frequency.
It's under the stairs. I love my mom.
All right, Chris, what do you got for us?
So, this came from a wonderful news article I spotted recently. Due to the fact that Colin Suleiman put it up on his Facebook, and I was like, oh, what's that? And obviously, so we're quite grateful for him for sharing that. So, this is about the extensive ancient underground network discovered that stretches all the way from Scotland to Turkey. So archaeologists have uncovered thousands of Stone Age underground tunnels stretching across Europe from Scotland to Turkey, and obviously researchers are unsure of the original purpose. German archaeologist Dr. Heinrich Kusch, in his book Secrets of the Underground Door to an Ancient World, revealed that tunnels were dug under literally hundreds of Neolithic settlements all over Europe, and the fact they've survived 12,000 years indicates that the original network must have been far larger, because of course over time we've dug up everywhere in Europe, because we're one of the most densely populated places in the world. So apparently in Bavaria there's around about 700 meters of these underground tunnel networks. There's some in Styria in Austria, there's about 350 meters, and even more sites across Europe. These tunnels are quite small, measuring only 70 centimeters in width, and so they're just big enough for a person to crawl through. Obviously some places lead into small rooms, storage chambers, and have seating areas that have been carved. The age of these locations puts them into three technological kind of prehistory periods: so Stone Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age. But these ones all occur in that transition out of the Stone Age between 6000 BC to 2500 BC. And while there's a lot of belief that Stone Age humans were quite primitive, there's been numerous examples recently, discoveries, which kind of, puts an end to that belief. There was the, I don't know whether you guys have seen this one, the Göbekli Tepe temple in Turkey, which has some very early signs of humans doing rituals to gods of the harvest, and that's a site that's 12,000 years old. Obviously we have the pyramids of Egypt and the temple and the pyramids of at Giza. They have networks of tunnels underneath them, and we also have Stonehenge. So the discovery of this vast network of tunnels indicates that Stone Age humans were, doing more than just hunting and gathering. And so the question is what the purpose of these tunnels were. Are they for a way of travelling safely in bad weather? Are they a way of sheltering from the harsh conditions, or from war and conflict? Or are they a way of traversing very large, distances from what would literally be kind of like from one town to another, or one city to another? Even though the cities would not have existed, I'm kind of giving an idea of like the sort of distances that you could have travelled with these. So, what could these tunnels be in the world of darkness? I have some ideas, and let's put Matt on the spot. What do you think? first off, how could you tie this into some World of Darkness game?
Well, if we want to tie this into Werewolf the Apocalypse, those could easily be, tunnels down to places where Banes were, kept captive. And there were supposedly like gigantic tunnels underneath most of Europe and United Kingdom that were tunnels down to black spiral dancer nests.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, I was kind of thinking along the lines of. I would also say you could also have a look at the fact that these tunnels could be a way of entering the underworld. So these are the border between the upper depths of the underworld in, say, Geist and our world, or they could also be into the network, the warren of tunnels that are created by, am I right? Created by spectres in Wraith and in Orpheus.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds about right. Mike, any ideas?
Yeah, and this is definitely a great secret frequency for a werewolf episode. So, one thing it could be is maybe all these little communities actually had small cairns underneath them. But since then, the nodes have simply dried up, and it's kind of a sad fact of Garou society that all of these villages were once thriving with kinfolk, and now there's nothing there. Another option, reading the Werewolf the Apocalypse novel, The Last Battle, a couple of Garou go and meet up with the oldest, if not shapeshifter, the oldest Gural, which is one of the werebears. And it's kind of a dull scene where they just kind of meet her by a tree. I think this sort of a cave system like this, cut into Neolithic rock, would be a really cool scene to have in your game.
Right, because the Gural can, hibernate for millennia.
Precisely. Yep, so that's another option as well. It could just be that these were once Gural layers, but they've... Of course, during the War of Rage, where the werewolves went and decided to attack all the changing breeds and assert their dominance, many of the werebears were actually wiped out. And this is what remains of their once thriving culture.
I was also thinking you could obviously tie this into anything to do with kind of the reworking of ley lines, and so dragon lines, and so that kind of ties into the fact that these could be the remnants of some form of remnant of pre-fall of Atlantis, so in Mage the Awakening, and equally tie that into Mage Ascension. Considering these are all across Europe, it could be tied to the Verbena, or even depending on how the network is laid out, could this be some sort of maybe a European kind of link to the Alibatini with their web in
right.
Mage the Ascension and in Sorcerer's Crusade and so forth. Obviously, you also can look at these from the point of view of how they relate to mummies, because mummies are very ancient beings, and so maybe these are the work of their cultists who had previously used these as places to keep their mummies, who they venerate and worship. And of course, the use of these tunnels has fallen out of use, but of course there may be some areas of tunnels still to be found and some mummy to be awoken. There's also some parallel you can make between these tunnels and, say, the tunnels under the catacombs of Rome. And so, obviously, this is a prehistoric vampire society. So you could use it. Maybe these are tunnels that were where... I'm trying to think of which ones would be in the European one. Maybe Gangrel or Mekhet vampires, lived underground during the Stone Age. And of course, you could easily apply that to Vampire the Masquerade, because of course it'd be a very strange period of time to play any form of the World of Darkness games, because so many of the big historical events that we know of and that we like to tie into our games of World of Darkness haven't occurred. And so we're in an age where history is a literal blank slate, and so you could play it in so many different ways, and you could have events that do become you could work in events of your own imagination that, of course, get lost to the sands of time.
All right, is that it for the secret frequency? Any other ideas? Nothing?
They're boggart holes. The fairies.
Yeah,
Changeling. That game. If we've forgotten something, we'll just. Oh, finally, they're a form of ancient engine of the God Machine.
from ancient engine, but they're just holes in the ground. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but the holes that channel things, they are the literal. They could be the literal veins and lungs of the God Machine for some weird infrastructure of geomancy.
Intriguing.
And you could probably just drop a V8 into one of the bigger holes if you want to make it a literal engine.
Yep.
Cool. Alright, I think that's it for the secret frequency. So, let's move on over to the new World of Darkness.
World of Darkness 2.0.
Hey, Chris, want to talk about werewolves some more?
Yeah, let's talk about werewolves. Let's talk about Werewolf the Forsaken. So, one of the things that's led me to this choice is the fact that there was a whole load of tribes in Werewolf the Apocalypse. And, obviously I saw there was some definite thematic elements of these tribes I like, and there are some tribes that have, as we said, they're more ethnic based, and there's elements of cultural appropriation in their write-ups. Now, this made me think about how these tribes could be used for inspiration in New World of Darkness, for how you could give a more local or give kind of more unique flavor to variations of the tribes of the moon from Werewolf the Forsaken. So, say you could use the Fianna as a bit of inspiration for how maybe a tribe of, say, let me choose Hunters of Darkness, how a pack of Hunters of Darkness in Werewolf the Forsaken would be in Ireland. They would have a slightly different feel to how they are in say New York, or say in China, or wherever. Which eventually led me on to the thoughts of, well, what do we know about the tribes in Werewolf the Forsaken, and how their presentation in the core book is really a bit limited compared to what has been what they've further expanded upon in the book Tribes of the Moon. So, where shall we begin? A brief overview of the tribes in Werewolf the Forsaken?
Yeah, but I think before we even get to that, I mean, just looking at how... Let's compare quite briefly the difference between a tribe in Werewolf the Apocalypse and a tribe in Werewolf the Forsaken. So in Werewolf the Apocalypse, a tribe is something that you're essentially born into, although there is the ability to leave a tribe. For example, there's a great short story in the When Will You Rage anthology. I think Sam Chupp wrote this one. It's about a Get a Fenris female who went and joined the Black Furies. And Matt, you alluded to that that situation earlier during the previous segment. So there is some ability to change your tribe, especially with different rites and rituals and that kind of stuff.
Well, you can like actually leave a tribe once you've been initiated, but there's also the fact that you can just not be initiated and get adopted by another tribe.
Right. Now, in Werewolf the Forsaken, tribes are definitely political entities, and it's I wouldn't say simple.
I wouldn't say political entities even. I would say they're more schools of thought.
Sure. Yeah. I agree. And I think the two core elements to each of them is how they interact with humans and how they interact with other werewolves. For example, you have the Iron Masters, and they are generally more accepting of humanity and tend to be more shepherds of humanity and try to work with them in the systems available.
And they're also more open to change. So the Iron Masters are, that's their thing is change, but not needless change. So they're kind of, there's this whole neophile thing about them. Yeah.
Precisely. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the Blood Talons, who are really very much a warrior tribe, and they tend to be more heavy-handed, dealing with both other werewolves and mortals in general. So that's two of the tribes right there, kind of in a nutshell. Chris, where are the other three?
Okay, so I think if I go through, because obviously I've read through Tribes of the Moon, most of it now, so I have a good overview. So the Blood Talons, as you said, are this warrior tribe, and they have a I'm trying to think of what the term is. It's a not a ban. It's a I can't think of the word now. You have to cut this while I think of what's
their oath.
The oath, yeah. I'm trying. Sorry, I was thinking in changeling terms just then. Christ's sake. Yes, so the oath is, offer no surrender that you would not accept, and that on first reading seems very rigid. And as you say, they're warriors, but they're actually they're not stupid warriors. They will. When it says offer no surrender that you would not accept, that is such a malleable term. And so also their idea of what to be a warrior is also, very fluid, depending upon what region of the world you're from, or who you've been brought up by, or which werewolves have brought you into that tribe. You then have the Bone Shadows, who generally are the ones that deal with dead things and look after a lot of the old knowledge and converse with some spirits. And so their whole thing is pay each spirit in kind, which is all about respecting spirits. But also that again is kind of malleable, because it's about, well, you only have to respect a spirit that's respecting you, and vice versa. So if a spirit does not respect you, then you owe it nothing. And of course, as I say, they also have a lot of say ghosts and insight into things that have been and dealing with spirits. Hunters in Darkness are your kind of classic kind of silent killers of the night, and their oath is let no sacred place in your territory be violated. And that again brings up this wonderful question of, well, what counts as sacred? And again, you have this continuing conversation of, for a hunter in darkness, what they consider sacred, what counts as a violation, and where's the middle ground in that? Because of course you just can't fly off the handle and kill another werewolf if they walk in on your sacred place, because that's breaking of harmony. So it's quite difficult in that sense. They're also, the Hunters of Darkness are all about that life is a continual hunt. So there is the hunt with capital H, and that there are phases to this. Iron Masters, as you've said, honor your territory in all things, which means you don't have to honor things in your territory if it doesn't deserve honor. So again, the question is, when does something deserve honor, and when does it not? And yeah, they're the shepherds of humanity, so they try and, again, police the boundaries more so between humans and the spirit world, whereas, say, the rest of the tribes are about bringing a balance between the world in general and the spirit world.
And the Iron Masters and the Hunters in Darkness get into fights a lot, because the Hunters in Darkness want to, protect their sacred places, whereas the Iron Masters want to gentrify things and make things better so as to honor them.
Well, yeah, all these oaths are so open to interpretation, and I think that's one of the nice things about it, and you kind of get into that when you read Tribes of the Moon. And Stormlords, of course, is allow no one to witness or tend to your weakness, which again seems very rigid. And so these are kind of the classic leaders, and when you read up more upon them, they're also about not only allowing no one to witness your weakness, but it's about overcoming it, empathizing with someone else's weakness, and taking revenge, and so it's about honor. So yeah, we have these five basic, these five tribes, And of course, the first thing we can say about all the tribes, as they're just straight written, is they are tied to no particular area of the world, no ethnic group, no nothing. So this means that a pack of Stormlords in London and a pack of Stormlords in Australia, the thing, they may have different rites, rituals, may have a different idea of what their oath translates into for them, but they all are tied to the same totem. Their totem in that case being the Winter Wolf. And it really gives a different feel for, I think that gives a different feel for what these tribes are, say, compared to what tribes are in Werewolf the Apocalypse. So, and of course, Tribes of the Moon expands upon this and gives lots of examples on how a person is initiated into a tribe, how they're taught different things depending upon what their auspice is. So that's the phase of the moon that you have your first change under. It also gives interpretations of how to deal with other werewolves or deal with violations of your ban. And then there's even examples in Tribes of the Moon of different lodges. So lodges are kind of like even more specialized groupings of werewolves, and they follow a set particular kind of ideals and practices. And again, there's examples of lodges which practice things that may be considered heretical to other members of their tribe or other tribes. Where to begin really with Tribes of the Moon? Because I think the point is that the way the tribes are presented in the core book as they stand is very, and I think this is the problem with any core book, is that the tribes of the standard seem very may look very rigid or very limited. So, like for example, offer no surrender that you would not accept could lead you, on first glance, to be playing a werewolf that never backs down from a fight. But that's not really. That's too much of a literal interpretation, and that's what I find kind of interesting about the way the tribes are presented.
Yeah, I definitely think, again, comparing it to Werewolf the Apocalypse, one of the major changes is that, in Werewolf the Apocalypse, the tribes are very much based on real-world cultures. You have the Get Fenris, who have Scandinavian and Germanic influences. You have the Black Furies, who were out of Greece. But when you look at the tribes in Forsaken, they don't really have that, which might seem like there's not something to instantly kind of grab for a concept. But Tribes of the Moon does a very good job of introducing how these different tribes exist in different regions of the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it gives numerous in-game artifacts, so stories and legends to tell of them, and even interpretations of how the tribes even got their totem in the first place. So you can really play up the differences between, say you're playing a Blood Talon and you're part of a multi-tribe pack from say Boston, but then you go all the way to, say, for some reason you've gone all the way to California and you start talking to the Blood Talons there, and just the thought processes are completely different.
Right.
So Matt, what's your impression of the tribes then, and how they compare to Werewolf the Apocalypse?
Well, to a certain extent, I look at some of the tribes and I can't help but think, oh, the Blood Talons, that's, the Get Fenris and Red Talons just smashed together into a single tribe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of thematic elements that it looks like they're borrowing wholesale from Werewolf the Apocalypse, just without any of the real cultural tribes. Like I can see a lot of Silver Fangs and Shadow Lords in the Storm Talons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Basically, what you tend to see between the classic World of Darkness and the new is that the splats in the classic tend to be more stereotypes. There's really kind of a monolithic culture to a lot of these tribes. And then you look at the New World of Darkness and you get more of an archetype with this splat type.
And that's where, say, in New World of Darkness, the whole point of why you've got, bloodlines and not tribes, and lodges can reintroduce a more local, if you wanted to create something that had a very specific feel, you can reintroduce that into these archetypes and narrow the focus down. Like these are all from say the Carpathian Mountains, because these are all werewolves from the lodge of whatever lodge would be in the Carpathian Mountains.
Just call them the Shadow Lord's Lodge or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Vigo the Carpathian.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think that's a good thing, and I think that's obvious. I think it's quite clear, maybe that is a purposeful distancing from Werewolf the Apocalypse, is to remove that ethnicity of tribes, because why can't you be a mystic in that style, but be in be from any other part of the world you would like to be? And I think then that plays into the idea that you have these tribes which have come down through the ages and have these stories that they've brought with them, and these legends and these rituals and ceremonies that have propagated and spread out over the world. And so you have different packs and different in different areas that all have little bits of the puzzle of their tribe, of their origins, and different stories of how they've evolved. And I think that adds some richness to the setting, because you can go, well, we're all blood talons, but we're not like you blood talons, because we have our own unique history. The other thing I think is quite different is obviously that, and I think, Matt, we were talking about this before the show a while back, is there's a different balance between in Werewolf the Apocalypse and Werewolf the Forsaken with where gifts come from. So in Werewolf the Forsaken, obviously Auspice is important, because that gives you some abilities and gives you certain gifts. And then, of course, depending on which tribe you're a member of, that gives you access to another set of gifts. And then if you're a member of a lodge, that gives you access to more abilities and maybe access to other gifts. So because you have the diversity of characters being created that can be from different auspices, it's quite easy to play games where the pack is all from one tribe, or are maybe from one or two tribes, to give this kind of cohesiveness to your player groups. They're not arguing about things or being pulled away to deal with tribe things. So how would that compare to, say, in Werewolf the Apocalypse, of how tribe plays into how packs are created for players?
Well, I think in Werewolf the Apocalypse, there's a lot more emphasis on the Garoon Nation as a whole, and there are a lot more multi-tribal septs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very, very rare that you have a big sept that is only one tribe. Like, you might see that, especially amongst, like, a high-rise cairn probably be mostly Glasswalkers, if not entirely Glasswalkers. Something in the Deep Wilds might be all Red Talons, because the Red Talons don't want anybody else there.
Mm-hmm.
But once you start getting into the really big cairns, you start getting the other tribes coming in and setting up shop, because they, one, want to be there to share in the success, and two, want to be there in case something bad happens, that they don't lose, the rank 5 cairn, because that's really important.
But a sept is a lot larger than a pack itself. A sept covers the entire city,
right,
doesn't it? Yeah, so
right.
The thing I'm saying is that in Werewolf the Forsaken, though, you can have multiple tribes in a city, but I think it's more feasible to play for players to play characters all as a pack from one tribe, even though other tribes still exist, because you can have that amount of there's inherent amount of diversity in just choosing your auspice in what gifts you get. So you don't feel like you have to have the entire pack has to be from every tribe and every auspice for you to cover all the bases.
Right, and like I said, there's also that in Apocalypse too, because there's like the thing that I was trying to say is that it allows for multi-tribal packs a lot better than I think Forsaken does. Because if you've got a multi-tribal sept, then a new pack has a higher chance of being multi-tribal.
Mm-hmm.
And the gift lists are have a lot more going for them, I think, because like the Ragabash gift lists, like there's 5 or 6 rank 1 Ragabash gifts. Whereas you look at the Araka in Forsaken,
Mm-hmm.
like he has access to 3 gift lists, but there's only 1 rank 1 gift in each of those lists.
True, but then there's also a slight difference is in how you even learn gifts. So you don't have to learn gifts in a linear progression in Forsaken. So how you learn those is different. How you have to invest into them is different.
You didn't have to learn them in a linear manner in Apocalypse either.
Okay, good. So yeah, I think the main thing I've taken though from Tribes of Me is really again like, I think the case where the way what you're presented in the core book of Forsaken is a very really gives just a very brief overview of the diversity that is actually allowed by that. And I think you can often, and this is the same with Vampire, is you can often treat tribes or treat covenants or treat each of those groups in New World Darkness as almost kind of like a class, like you would in D&D or something, yeah. And that's a very really narrow way to view this. So every Blood Talon player is going to be the fighter of your group. I think is a very limited way of applying what the Blood Talons are, say, in the game. Or, how every, Iron Master is going to be the one that makes all the gifts in your group. He may not be, the artificer of your group. So I think that's something that I've really taken home from Tribes of the Moon. Mike, what things have you also picked up in Tribes of the Moon then, which kind of expand upon the tribes that are written in Forsaken?
Well, again, I think it gives you a lot of thoughts for how to look at a tribe in a different region, and just really throws a lot of ideas at you. What's an example? Like having really punk, gothic punk Blood Talons in Chicago, for example. I think it says that in the book.
Yeah.
But you can go elsewhere, and there's something very different. That's really one of the best things. That's really just a good way to grab some ideas for how the tribe might be in a certain region, or even just some ideas for different packs. Because you could easily have a pack which leaves their home city for whatever reason. Maybe there's not enough territory, ends up somewhere else, and they're really at odds with the other members of their tribe in that region.
And I think that's what plays into this whole, interpreting, the oath of a tribe, and how different packs will interpret it differently, and then a tribe in one region will interpret it different to another tribe, to the same tribe but in a different place. And again, there's obviously some interesting role-playing opportunities in that. So you get conflicts occurring as different packs argue over the application of an oath, and I think then that draws us into the point where you get the same issues with the current, because obviously this is Werewolf running off the New World of Darkness humanity system pre-God Machine Chronicles, and so I think it could be very easy for a storyteller to be too heavy-handed in applying the breaking points of harmony based upon the straight up letter as it's written application of an oath. I think again you have to get behind, and this obviously this may be some ideas on how you use what's in the God Machine Chronicles. So you have to get behind how your character views the oaths and how they apply to them, and then how they apply to their pack, and then how they apply to their tribe as a whole. Because characters have different ideas of morality, and so they may find that, say for the Iron Masters, honor your territory in all things. So one character may honor things in a slightly different way to another because they have different personal experiences. So while one person may honor, say, their home and their entire territory, another character may only honor specific things within their in what falls into their territory. Like they may only honor like particular landmarks because they have particular important spirits tied to it, and that's all based upon their own personal experiences. And so when they do violate these things, it's different. Their violations come at different points because of their experiences. And I think that's the important thing there. And so I think that's a guide to how you can make use of the God Machine Chronicles integrity system, and even start applying that to the Werewolf the Forsaken. That you would have to just write up a new list of, you would look at the werewolf and you would go, well, obviously these are all breaking points, like eating another werewolf and eating a wolf and eating a human, so forth and so forth. Mm-hmm. But when you get to like the oaths to the tribe and the oath to the pack totem, is you would have to ask another set of questions in order to ascertain how important those things are to that character, so that you know that they may or may not get bonuses to that breaking point. And of course, one of the cool things, there are plenty of great lodges in Tribes of the Moon. I think a particular one which I liked. There's some, like as I say, there's some which are all about breaking the rules of the tribes. There was one that's about cannibalistic werewolves, and it's really getting behind how they reason that they're allowed to be cannibals, and it's all to do with how they balance regaining harmony against losing it, because they believe that if something is useless, it should be consumed and destroyed.
Sweet.
And put to better use.
Which lodge is that?
Oh, I think that's Hunters in Darkness. I'll have to find it later. But again, it's all these lodges that are presented in the book, and all these different initiation rites and different rituals are all about really challenging what the interpretation of a tribe oath means. And I think that's really, that's just is filled with great role play potential, because you can then see, you're playing a game of Werewolf and everyone's playing, say, you've got your pack together, and say you've got 2 or 3 different tribes present in your pack, and most of the auspices are covered. And then obviously the characters go off and get involved in tribal matters, and it all boils down to interpretation, and then you have these really difficult judgment calls that have to be made. And I think that's the one thing to take home, is just don't apply these oaths that the tribes have written in the core book as they're written, because that's just going to limit the role play opportunities there.
Nice.
Do you have a particular favourite tribe in any of Werewolf the Apocalypse? Werewolf the Forsaken.
Well, I'm kind of liking the Bone Shadows right now, because I'm liking this Lodge of the Reaping. They're the cannibalistic
yeah, that's
ones.
the one. Yeah. Yeah, they're wicked.
Oh, that's neat.
I find it difficult to know. I really like the Bone Shadows because they have a great opportunity to cross over with Geist and just the dead in general, and there's some nice little fetishes and so forth that you can use for that. There's also one which is kind of interesting. There's a lodge which is in for the Iron Masters. I think it's the Lodge of Wires, and it almost hints that they think they're venerating some tribal, some totem spirit that is. It's called the digital. I think it's called the Digital Eye, or the
yes. That's
yeah.
correct.
And you're just kind of thinking, they sure they're talking to a spirit? You don't think they could be just being manipulated by the Exarch of Panopticon, who also uses an eye as its symbol? So again, there's potential for crossover there.